This company's never been more profitable.
You mean hugely profitable?
I like it.
DavePorter.com presents The Profitable Cleaner, a podcast on commercial cleaning sales and entrepreneurship. The one podcast that's not afraid to discuss real sales strategies with real cleaning professionals that produce real profits and real results.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Profitable Cleaner. Super excited to have this guest join us today. I know you guys have been used to hearing a lot of commercial cleaning owners, some trainers, some coaches, but it's gonna be different. I actually decided to tap into my network, my immediate network of brothers, and this guy jumped to the challenge here, so it's gonna be super exciting. But these people have a heart of gold. They work harder than most people that I know, and I look up to them. So George, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Hey Angel, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be on here with you.
Yeah, man, super excited. I've seen the amount of lives that you've impacted. I've seen how your own life has changed, and I know one of the lives that has been impacted is mine as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself so that the listeners can get familiar with who is this George Apecechea guy here in the podcast?
Totally, man. Well, first off, again, thanks for having me on here. I've known you for quite some time now, Angel, and it's just really nice to have a platform to be able to share your story. We talk about it a lot, you and I individually, that it's important that we really step into our own identity and our own assignment in life, because we live in an age of comparison, and sometimes, that robs us of our individuality. And our superpower is our own uniqueness and our own story that we can tell. And so I think there's a lot of power in sharing a story and sharing your own story. So I encourage, the listening audience and the viewing audience to think about that. Next time you have an opportunity to share your story, don't sell yourself short, because there might be somebody out there in the world that has, who knows, like a parallel life that can really be inspired or really needs to listen to that message that you're about to say. So don't ever sell yourself short with sharing what's in your heart and sharing your story, because it's unique to you. Only you can say it the best way that you can say it. Nobody else can say it better than you.
100%.
So with that said, my story, I'll say it in a nutshell here, but I am a son of an immigrant family. So my parents immigrated from Mexico in the early 80s to Dallas, Texas, where I grew up. And I grew up in a family of just a lot of humble beginnings and just really, honestly, low resources now, if we're talking from a financial standpoint, but brimming and overflowing with love and wisdom and guidance. That's my reality. That's the family that I grew up with. And I say that as part of my story, because that's so much a part of who I am now, so much a part of my identity, and why I behave the way I do and why I have the goals that I do. So those are the roots. And in my house, in my family, growing up, I was the youngest of four. So I have two older sisters and an older brother. And then it's me. I'm kind of the last in the family, the last in line, semi-accident surprise in the family. But now everyone's very happy with me, I think. So that's a little bit about my formation. It's been interesting to reflect on this, Angel, to know that I'm a product of my dad, who is 83 years old. He's and my mom, who's 6 or 7 years younger. They're like parents and grandparents all wrapped up in one, with that kind of a wisdom that they taught me. And then 3 other siblings that are all older than me, I was able to learn from them as they went through life as a first generation, Mexican-American young person trying to figure things out, going to college for the first time, opening up a bank account for the first time. Yeah. That's the background that I come from. And so to ask who am I is to know my beginnings, that were humble. And if I can't talk about who I am without honoring the people that really formed me and really pushed me forward and that helped me. So I really stand on their shoulders. As cliche as it may sound, like that's exactly that's part of who I am now, at least my beginnings.
I don't think it's cliche at all. I actually think, hearing you say this, it's kind of like a reminder, a slap in the face for me. I'm like, oh, you're right. A lot of us are standing in their shoulders, and I don't think a lot of us appreciate where we come from, or who was part of our formation. So no, that's awesome. What about now, man? Like, what do you do now? Tell us a little bit about that.
Totally. So my story is kind of a unique one because I grew up in Dallas and I had a series of 9 to 5 jobs, right? We're in the entrepreneur space now, but my 20s really were early 20s, music teacher at a high school for like the early part of my 20s. Second half of my 20s was working at a university at different capacities, but admissions advisor and international student advisor. So my background was all education, nothing to do with entrepreneurship at all, which is what I do now. But nearing 30, a weird twist of fate happened in my life where my second oldest sister got married to a guy who was an up and coming solopreneur,
Mm-hmm.
and you know who I'm talking about. His name's Douglas James, and I remember being at the wedding, and you know this story too because we've talked about it. But the idea is, I was at the wedding and I got to meet my brother-in-law Douglas's circle of entrepreneur friends during the bachelor party and at the wedding. So sharing a limo with him, just sharing time with young mid 20s 7-figure earners, and me, back in my life in Dallas, 9 to 5, scraping by, thinking that I was doing something, right? And so that changed my paradigm quite a bit. It opened me up to knowing that there's a different way and just a different life, and it really spoke to me. So after the wedding that happened here in San Diego, I was I went back to Dallas and I was just really asking myself some hard questions about where my life was, where I wanted it to go. And ultimately I came to the decision of just saying goodbye to my life in Dallas. I mean, I quit my job that I had already was working for about 4 to 5 years trying to build my career in the university space as the admissions or international advising space. And sometimes in life you think that you're in a career path it's going to take you all the way to retirement. You're going to be old and gray
Yeah.
doing that. In the moment you think that, right, and you plan around that. But that's not the case because my life took a big L shift, and I made a very drastic move. I quit my job. I sold all my belongings. I said all my goodbyes to all my friends, and I had a wide network of friends. I said goodbye to my parents. My parents were old school traditional. So risk is not in their vocabulary, okay? It's
Agreed.
like
Agreed.
their highest, and with all my heart I say this, but their highest goal and pursuit in their life was to have a home in the US. And I look back on that, and that's a huge, huge thing that they accomplished. Coming from Mexico, making the dangerous trip across the border in that time period in the 80s, and then having a home in the US. That was their biggest goal. But that was kind of like the floor for me. I needed to take that, grab that torch, and do even better. So I thought about those things and I said, how can I maximize my existence and my life and go for my dreams and step into a new level of human being? And I prayed about it, I meditated on it, and all signs pointed west, to San Diego. So I did that. I said my goodbyes. And the reason I mentioned my parents is because they are so risk adverse. Whenever I told them that I was going to drop everything, quit my job, and move to San Diego, I knew that I knew exactly how they were going to react. They were going to say, "No, estás loco? ¿Por qué te vas para allá?" And they were going to have, "No, you're crazy. Why are you going out there?" So I strategically told them that I was going to San Diego the night before I
That's the
drove to
smart
San
way of
Diego.
doing it.
That's the
That's
only way it could happen. And it's tough, man, because I'm so close to my family. We're close knit. That was the hardest thing for me to leave my aging parents, my family, to come out here to try to do something better for myself.
Let me ask you something. One, I've been there making the moves, and it's not easy. It's not easy, especially like when the families that close because now you're missing family parties. Now you're missing the Sunday dinners, the Sunday
Yeah.
breakfast after church, right? Like you're missing all those things, and you're out here, and they're like, "What is going like from there in this? What is he doing?" Now, obviously, for someone that went from education university to entrepreneurship, moved their stuff to San Diego, again, I get to see the behind the scenes. So I've seen all the growth, right? What was the first step to making that one big decision? Moving is a big decision. Letting go of what you built for the last 4 to 5 years, whether even in career, and going from that to like almost what did you go all commission going into San Diego? I can't remember. Was it all commission or did you just had a job lined up, right? Or an opportunity, not a job?
Yeah, that's the thing. I didn't have any job lined up. I was
Oh, you
jobless
didn't.
for
Okay,
three
that's why I'm
months.
asking. Okay.
I just came out to be in proximity. Yeah,
How
just to,
important is proximity?
oh, it's everything. Yeah. Proximity is extremely important. And I do want to say something on proximity, but going back to your earlier point about how I chose to come out here, I think about it now, it's one word, it's identity. Identity. I think that's what it hinges on. And the reason for that is whenever I was working at the 9 to 5, I had a certain identity, and everything that I did was based on that identity. And albeit now I can say that was a limiting belief identity. That's who I was in that identity and the things that I wanted in that identity. When I came to San Diego and went to my sister's wedding and met these young 20 something 7-figure entrepreneurs, it made me ask some hard questions about my identity. It made me ask some hard questions about who I was and who I wanted to be and become. So, whenever my paradigms were shifted, whenever I had to ask myself some hard questions, no longer was I sure about my identity in the moment. Not because I wasn't doing anything, good or, beneficial, but because there was a next floor, there was a next level for me to enter into that I wasn't entering into. Not just the next floor, but multiple floors that I had never even thought about in life, multiple different levels. And here I was operating at this level that was not going to take me anywhere large in life or anywhere big. So that's to answer your question. The identity piece was it for me. My identity shifted, and it was harsh because I was like, I had to look myself in the mirror and ask myself what I really wanted. And so whenever I realized that I wanted to enter into a new level and have a higher identity, well, that just made me feel very uneasy, stressed, unhappy. I was unhappy with myself back at home because I wasn't stepping into my full potential and my full greatness in that next level or next levels.
Exactly.
So that uneasiness really picked at me, day and night until I actually came out here. So to answer your question, it was like I was increasingly unhappy with my own reality and my own identity at that time. And I just wanted to break free to higher levels, and that's why I came out here.
I think the and before we go into proximity, because I think I'm so glad you said identity, man. One of the themes for my week this week actually was if I push myself, who would I find? Not what would I
Mm,
find, who would I find, right? I think there's always this like comfortable identity, right? Like there's a reason you don't want to push yourself, and it's not because it sucks. It's not because you gotta wake up early or put in the work. Yeah, but I also think a lot of people are scared of who they're gonna find, right? Because
mm,
there's a glimpse of like I think you saw a glimpse of greatness of like who George could be when you made this move, and you're like, uh-oh, like, uh-oh, I've seen that for myself, right? I'm like, uh-oh, I think I can do more, but I can't do it here. What needs to change? Oh, I need to eat like this. I need to do like this. I need to operate like this, and I need to be here in this proximity. And you're like, oh no. A lot of people don't look for it because then it makes them do something about it, or at least it's like uneasy. How many people do we know that probably wanted to do something, they don't do it, and they're just living there? So you made that identity. You said, okay, all right, here we go. How do you keep evolving that identity? I guess to be my second question. The first question is if you're listening to this and you're going, huh, how do I identify my identity? Like, how do I work on that? if I'm listening to this right now?
100%. I think that, identity is such a big thing because, like it or not, even if you're not working on it, you have some kind of identity. There is something that you show to the world. There's a certain way that you show up. There's a certain way that you speak, certain actions and movements that you make. And that is who you are to the world. There's a great book called The Power of Next by Mike Bearden. And it talks about this concept of identity and surrender. And there's this like upward arrow like this, identity and an arrow, or downward and upward arrow, identity and surrender. And it talks about how in life we only ever go from identity to identity, almost like goalpost to goalpost. And it made so much sense when I heard this in the book, because you think about it, you grow up, you're 4 years old, you're playing in your sandbox, you think that's life and that's your identity, right? And then you grow up, you're 10 years old, and you're in grade school, you're making friends. And you couldn't even fathom the 4-year-old you, because now you have this brand new identity, and that's your whole life. And then you keep going, right? You're a teenager, you're in high school, you have your circle of friends. That's what life is. Then you become an adult, you get married, you have kids. Time and again, you become a business owner, whatever the case may be. Every time you absorb and assume a new identity, and you're wearing a new hat in life. So it just goes to show that you have an identity in a certain point of life. To your point and what you're asking about, how do you evolve your identity, or how you go to the next identity, is just to really have honest conversations with yourself. And really, it might even come down to this. Ask yourself, how do I feel? Am I uneasy? Am I staying up at night? Am I stressed out? Like, am I feeling not good? Do I have a low grade anxiety in the back of my neck right now? That might not always be a bad thing. That might be the universe. That might be God telling you that you're ready for your next identity, and trying to, slap you in the face and wake you up and say, hey, look, this identity already served you to its max potential. Now you have to make the uncomfortable journey from this identity to this identity. And yes, it is uncomfortable, because you leave your comforts and your paradigm and your identity that you wore for so long. But you inevitably have to move to that next identity. And it's uncomfortable. And it takes, honestly, it's going to sound harsh, it takes dying to yourself, dying to your old identity. And this can get into like some biblical scriptural talk, but you die to yourself in order to be reborn to a new identity. And I think that's the indicator of when you should change to a new identity. But make no mistake about it, at every point in life, you surrender to an identity, whatever that identity may be, right? You may be
So is
staying in
this
this
a
pocket too
cycle?
long.
Is this a
Mhm.
cycle? So do you surrender? So you now, like, you surrender to an identity,
Yeah,
then you're like, okay, this is not. You start feeling that again, because our
yeah,
God made us too perfect, man. God made us too perfect. Our body, our mind will tell you when it's time, and
yeah.
I just don't think enough people are willing to listen, to their own self, right? But so you're saying, I surrender. This is who I am right now. Something happens, you feel the uncomfort, and you're, oh, here comes the change. Then you have to you have to kill your current identity that you surrender to, reborn, surrender, kill. Like, you're just, and it's just a never ending. Is there such thing as an ending cycle for an
Oh,
identity? And I know we're just
absolutely.
going into it, but
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that, because you got to really ask yourself, why am I dying to myself to get to the next identity? And for me, I can only speak personally, but I'm trying to uncover the fullness of life and experience the fullness of life. And I'm always geared towards excellence and to get the best level. That's just who I am personally. Everybody's different. But if you're listening to this podcast, you might be more inclined to the entrepreneur route, which are people that are generally go getters, leaders, people that want to be the best of the best or strive towards excellence. So if you look at it from that standpoint, what is the end goal? The end goal is to experience the fullness of life and to reach your max potential. Then it makes sense, all of the identity to identity and all the stress and all the dying to yourself to get to those points. But the best way that I've heard it said about this topic, about identity and about life, is from my dad, my 83-year-old dad. And for the longest time, he'd tell me this story, or this cuento, and it never really landed on me until recently. And he said that life is a lot like a bus ride. You know, you get on a bus, you go from bus stop to bus stop. People get on in your life, people get off from your life. You don't stay in the bus stop too long, and you go to the next bus stop. People get on, people get off. Then you go to the next and next and next until your final destination, and that's life. And I think that that's it. I think it's knowing your mortality and knowing that you have a finite existence and it's really, really, really short. Um, it allows you to understand that it's important to experience as much as you can in life and try to uncover as many levels as you can and try to help as many people as you can as well.
I love that, by the way. That, but the bus thing is making me reflect a lot. But you're not wrong. It's hard, even though we all know it. There's three things that will never go away, right? Change, death, and taxes. But that's a different conversation. But the death part, we know that we're mortals. We know that we're here in this world at least, right? And then you go to heaven, right, or the spirit world with God. But that's a different. Again, I don't want to go into those topics. But the whole point is, we know that there's a day where we're not gonna be here anymore. And I think that's what makes it beautiful to have like the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of life, of living life. At what point, and I guess here's my question: when I hang out with, if I hang out with you, Nicholas, Cody, the brothers, Douglas, James, right? When you hang out with them, you see it, you feel it, you feel the pursuit. You know that like they have almost like a snake skin, like you know that they have their skin on, but they're like shedding daily, like they're just
Yeah.
growing and evolving. Somebody listening to this, and I know it, used to do that, used to seek new identities, push themselves. I love when I start getting stress or anxiety. I tell my fiance all the time, like, something big is coming. I gotta keep pushing. Like, I cannot stop now. Like, I know something's awesome's coming. Someone listening to this is probably comfortable, stale, or it probably has like this inner warrior in them that they're like bottled in right now. What advice or what can they do now, to start kind of unlocking that from within them so that they can be like, oh, cool, now I want a new identity. Because
Yeah.
you can become numb to it, correct? Like, you can become numb to what your body's trying to tell you. So what advice would you give someone to either listen to themselves or just see if there's an inner self trying to do some work there for them?
Yeah. The best advice I've ever received from one of my mentors, Dr. Jeff Spencer, he's a guy who works with gold medal Olympians. He works with, has worked with people like Lance Armstrong, Tiger Woods, Richard Branson, Jim Quick. He's a gold medal Olympian himself, a cyclist.
Oh,
He told me this simple thing. He said, George, play your own game. Play your own game. And I was like, wow, what a concept, you know? You see, I mentioned earlier, like the comparison game, you know? Yeah, play your own game. But here's the thing, though, play your own game doesn't mean I'm going to just be lazy, sleep, you know, till noon and not do much with my life because I'm playing my own game. No, playing your own game means being honest with yourself, taking total accountability for your life and everything in it. Like if you get to that point, when you take max accountability for your happiness, for your coming and going, like everything that you do, we're called to be stewards. You know, the Bible says we're called to be good stewards of the things in our life. And what's in our life? Well, we got our whole body, we've got all of our energy, we've got our 24 hours, we've got the people in our life that we
mm,
lead, you know, especially as entrepreneurs. So we're called to be good stewards of that. And that concept will really help you understand, at least it did for me, that, hey, I have a responsibility here for myself and everything in my life. And because of that, I know that it's important for me to not look to anyone else, but really look to myself and ask myself the hard questions and play my own game and go off into life in my uniqueness and start to play my own game.
I think that's a great point you made there. I think if you're hearing this, what he just said is gonna trigger you to do two things, or you're gonna do two things ending this podcast, or right now, to be honest. You're gonna say, nope, he's wrong. it's because of this, because of how I grew up, because of, oh my god, and you're gonna start putting all these externals on why you play the game that, or honestly, a lot of us aren't even playing the game, right? We're just sitting in the benches acting like we're playing the game. And then there's gonna be others of you, like to me, you told me that once. I remember in one of the calls, I don't remember what I asked, and you're like, play your own game, and you explained it. And since then, it's like you said, how I show up, my energy, my body, my mind, those that are around me. It's on me. It's on no one else. It's on me. And I think, I guess, it's just easier to assume to not take that kind of responsibility, right?
A lot of times, yes, but you build critical mass. There's positive critical mass, there's negative critical mass. In my story, personally, I can only speak about me. Through my 20s, I was playing under my level, under my max potential for basically a decade. And I built negative critical mass. That means that I became increasingly unhappy with myself. I made my bed, I made my bed and I had to lay in it. So be careful with that. If you're listening, and to your point, Angel, yeah, one way or the other, for better or for worse, you're going to have to live with the consequences of the actions that you take. And that actually opens up another thought in my mind of, after a while, you start to realize something, that even though we're inherently, I guess, psychologically inherently selfish, like we're born and we want the baby bottle and we scream when we're cold and hungry and things like that. I think to experience the fullness of life again, like I say, is you start to realize that life is not solely about yourself, and you start to tap into servitude and to doing for others. I mean, that's the next level. That's the graduation. That's what truly brings fulfillment to life. And that's what I've been meditating on here at this stage of my life. So that's kind of the next progression. After you identify what matters to you, start to play your own game. From that, you start to grow and have so much abundance of virtues and fruits. And you can't just hoard them all for yourself. You can't just let your bank account continuing to grow and just have it all for yourself. At a certain point, you have enough for yourself. And what's the overflow? Where is the overflow going? In servitude to help others.
Let me ask you, because I'm gonna play. I don't like saying devil's advocate. I've been saying that a lot because I'm not a devil's advocate.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go opposite here and ask a question. Um, there's a lot of people that. So I love how you said, like, you build your bed, you make your bed, you lay on it, right? So basically, like, you make your decisions, you have the consequences, you build the life you want, and it hurts you, but it could also like impact others around you, right? Then there's, once you master your game, you can then serve. I don't know about you, but I think this happens a lot, and this has happened to me. I'm only gonna talk about me personally. Sometimes when everything is breaking apart over here and I'm not taking accountability, sometimes it's easier to kind of hide that just by going out and helping or serving, right? Where my cup's not even overflowing. I actually have a lot of scarcity, a lot of limiting beliefs, a lot of this, but I feel like if I serve, I might be doing something good. Do you see that a lot of people do that? Like their cup is not even full or flowing. It's actually like you should probably attain your cup, but they're over here serving to justify why um, they might not be pushing themselves, or why they might not be in their best version, or why they're not taking accountability. Do you ever see that?
Yeah, I would say don't underestimate the power of servitude and the compounding effect and the critical mass that you build from serving people. It's not always the instant result that you get, but in entrepreneurship, a lot of people don't understand a few concepts. In my personal opinion, they see the shininess and the bling and the income, but really, the way I play my game, if you talk about that, is I fill two main buckets that I'm always filling some way, shape, or form. Number one is to build my competency, to build my level, to build my knowledge, to build my wisdom. Okay. And then number two is to build my network. and my social equity. And if you want to build, and the reason to build your social equity and your network is because it just makes sense to have advocates for you, have people to help you, to whisper wisdom into you, people of different facets of life and business. Now, I think that it was Robert Kiyosaki who talked about you need to go into business, you need to go into life like a rugby team. And I know that you play rugby, Angel,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you can't go solo. You're going to get eaten up alive. And it's a war out there. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
reality. So you want to go in with a team, and you want to go in as a rugby team, and you want to have accountants, you want to have um, social media managers, you want to have all these different people that are going to help you inside of life. But the way that you amass that is by having social equity and network. So that's why servitude is very important. And it doesn't have to be like this Herculean effort of servitude that leaves you like in zeros. It can be micro, you know,
Okay.
it can be micro the way that you serve people. And to me, one of the best ways to serve people, man, it's simple. Dude, we walk around so many times with stress of the day, stress of things that are happening. Be a genuine light to people, you know, be optimistic, be happy, make people smile, you know, try to keep your commitments, show up on time. Like these little things that can really help. Be reliable to a person, be of value to a person. But of course, then you go into the conversation of setting boundaries for that too.
Of course.
But ultimately, all of your interactions, the way I think about it, have to be positive, have to be giving value. How am I being a person of value and giving value? And today, it's an awesome manifestation of that because I'm able to speak into this microphone and just pour out the best of the best that I have inside of me and give value to you and to the listening audience. So that was my intention when I woke up today and I did my morning routine. It's like my intention today is to serve and to give my best value.
I think so. Just to, I love what you're saying, and that makes sense. So there's different buckets in life. So you have to like you have to understand what buckets you're flowing in, what buckets you're probably falling short in, and in whichever bucket you do have overflow, learn to serve. Um, one of the now that we're in the identity conversation. By the way, I'm so glad that like I said before the podcast, I was like I don't know where this is gonna go. We had a topic went out the window because I really love the identity portion of it. Weird question to you. Do you do identity audits? Now that you know what identity you're in right now, do you ever, how often and or what do you do to keep yourself, okay, we're still following? Because what happens, it's happened to me, this is a new identity that I have, and
Hmm.
then something happens, and then poop, I fall short, right? So like
Yeah.
when I ended up with being type 2 diabetic, right? I was like, okay, my new identity in that moment was I'm type 2 diabetic, not and so like I would take insulin, I'm doing all this versus the identity that it morphed into, which is just I'm a healthy person. My new identity is not I'm type 2 diabetic. I'm just a healthy person. So I'm not gonna eat this. I'm not gonna eat this. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna work out like this. Like the identity shifted, and the way I measure part of my identity is this little thing that tells me my glucose levels, right? Like that.
Mm.
That's actually part of my identity. Do you have ways um, to measure the identity that you've taken on?
Absolutely. And I think that we're both doing this now, but mastermind communities, network and mastermind communities. It's so important. Sometimes we fall off. And I know this has happened to me a few times where you want to go off into like this hero journey and you're by yourself and you're like, you know, you have an altruistic mentality. Like you think about altruism, which is hey, I want to do something that nobody's ever done. My parents went so far in life. Maybe their generation was old. I'm a new generation. I'm going to do things better. I'm gonna achieve more. I'm gonna bring people together. I'm gonna, you know, lot of the times in our 20s we feel that way. And I say 20s because my mentor Jeff Spencer talks about this thing called the life lens progression, where he talks about what's important to people in decades, you know,
Hmm.
10s, 20s, 30s, 40s. And the 20s is altruism. That's like the value system. we're naive. We don't have enough dirt under our feet. We don't have enough wisdom. And no offense to any of the listening audience that is in their 20s, because it's also a beautiful thing because you're able to discover and prep and set yourself up for your 30s. But really, you don't have the real world wisdom in your 20s to actually know a lot or enough of what you need to know. But it's anyways, that's the
What's the
life
30s,
lens
by the way?
progression.
Now I'm curious. What's the 30s?
Conquest.
Can you elaborate on that? People listening to this are gonna be like, oh, come on, you can't leave me hanging like that. So I'll just
Yeah.
I love that because you're right. That's when you make the mistakes. It's when you
Yep.
hitch your
Danger zone.
wagon to some mentors, some others, and you make the
Yep.
wrong mentors and you make a mess. And then you're like, okay, I think leading, like I'm 27, I turned 28.
Yeah.
Last year into this year, I'm like, okay, hold on. Like, you're right. That's so funny that you said conquest. Like, now I want bigger things, better things, but not
Yeah.
just uh materialistic. I mean, like internally, like what kind of man do I want to be? What kind of husband do I want to be? What kind of son of God do I
Yeah.
want to be? Like it becomes. You're right. Going into the conquest part. What is the conquest portion of it? If they're going through this.
Yeah. 100%. So the way it was explained to me by my mentor Jeff Spencer is, 20s is altruism. Now, they're not in absolute decades. Like where you are now, 27, you can start to have an early tilt towards the next phase. And that happens a lot. For me, when I left Dallas and came to San Diego, that was me leaving altruism and entering into conquest, which makes sense, right? Out west to conquer, to get my new level. But the reason that we are so hinged towards conquest and that's important to us in our 30s is because of the way that our 20s went. Like we wanted to do the 20s our own way, and maybe we were a little naive about the way we were going about things. Maybe we were pulling all-nighters and, out too late or hanging out or playing around too much, whatever the case may be. We had a naive mindset. Again, no offense. I mean, I went through it. Okay. So, and now I'm in my
Same.
30s. So what happens in your 30s is when you cross that decade, you start to reflect. I'm like, man, what did I really accomplish in my 20s? What do I have to show for it? And I better do something different in my 30s than my 20s because I don't have the things, and I'm generalizing, of course. There's people that are successful in their 20s, no doubt. It wasn't my experience, so you start to evaluate and reanalyze that. And so you want to do your 30s a little bit different. Now, the reason conquest is important is because now you want to have something to show for your efforts, point blank period. That's why conquest is important in your 30s. And so you want, a lot of the times, the danger zone with that is, or the dangerous aspect of that is, you start to hinge your value towards objects,
Mhm.
materials, homes, cars, etc., which is a slippery slope also. But if done right, then you can have a great impact with your conquest phase.
And again, I love that. I don't know where this podcast goes because now I have another question, right? Which is awesome. Again, and I'm like podcasts are good because whoever's listening, I know you're learning a lot. But selfishly, I ask the questions that I love to learn about. But I think what you said right there is there's this. It happens, right? You're just kind of going through life. They try to pour wisdom into you, like, no, I got this. Then you realize, okay, what do I have to show for my efforts? And then I think the key statement there is show, right? And I think that's
Mm.
when people start seeing the external versus the internal. So, what are some ways that if it happens to a lot of CEOs that are listening to this, is like my value is attached to the revenue that my current company produces. My value is
Yeah,
attached to the client satisfactory that right. My value is attached to my cars, my marriage. That
yeah.
those are external. Of course, they influence like the identity, right? But I mean, how important is it? Are the external more of a results or like a measuring stick or not really? Like, because there is such thing as like loving yourself and being super valuable, but if you have nothing to show for it, is it more of a delusion or does that make sense? Like that's always like a slippery slope,
Hmm.
like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with wanting things and conquest. But I think that what I said before about, for me personally, what I try to focus on is my competency, my level wisdom, my knowledge that I'm gaining from me, and then my contribution or my network and my people, and pouring into my people. Because guess what? Let me use an analogy of like a hurricane. You know, you can build a whole life, you can have an amazing compound, whatever, and you have a hurricane that comes sweeps it all out. You're done, ground zero. You don't have any of anything. I mean, that's the way life is sometimes. You got a market correction, your niche is under attack, you know, it's not doing great, whatever the case may be. You have a series of chain events of unfortunate events, and now those things they just evaporate. And then what do you have after that? You have whatever you've poured into your mind, your knowledge base, your competency, and you have your network, your people, that if you treated them right and if you built enough social equity in them, a catastrophic event like that I'm explaining can turn into a simple shift, a phone call or text, and boom, you just bouncing right back up because you might have an opportunity through a networking partner or a friend, like a genuine friend that you
Yeah.
scratch their back, they scratch your back. That's the power of network.
I think you made a the biggest takeaway for me from this whole conversation. Now I'm huge on identity. Like I love the identity topic. I love pushing myself. I love figuring out. Like I'm I don't want to say obsessed, but I'm too intrigued by what can Angel do because human
Mhm.
beings like you can learn so much so fast. You don't need years. There comes a point where you just, anyways. I'm just really intrigued. But I think what you're saying is identify those buckets too,
Yeah.
so that those buckets, like as you fill them up, right? If your company's not doing the revenue, but one of the buckets is competency, right, and knowledge base, and that knowledge base is just overflowing, and even though your company is not here, but you know how to get there, then you still keep your value within yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to playing your own game. And also for me, another big nugget that I've learned um, is having a net positive mindset.
Hmm.
And what that means to me is even if I don't have a direct ROI from a certain action or direct money in pocket, let's put it that way to be blunt,
Hmm.
I make moves in my life that are net positive with a net positive mindset. That means that I know that if I get on a call with a prospect, right, and that's prime time with a prospect that could be a client, for example. If they hang up the phone on me or if there's no business done, my net positive mindset says, "Man, George, you're winning. That's a gold medal for you because you had prime time with a prospect. You got more market knowledge and research from that interaction than any Google search can give you because you get into the source. You if you did the call well and you were completely transparent and you aimed to serve that person and give value, you may have, you know, created a friend or one connection away from an actual sell. Like there's all these different permeation of situations that can result in something very positive. Now you have maybe you did a great job, it wasn't a sell. Now you have a really, really warm lead in the pipeline and you're stacking up those warm leads and your pipeline is looking amazing and you're top of
Hmm.
mind because you gave value. So that's a net positive mindset. Failures to me are it's really nothing, you know. If I gear myself towards a certain result with genuineness, with purity, with the greatest intent, I know that I'm always winning in every interaction, every move I make.
Dude, I love that because that's such a hard. That's a characteristic of a human being, and that's a like a muscle though. Like you have to
Yeah.
work it out. And I think I love that. Like my business partner says that a lot. He's like, "Well, I don't know what the result of this is gonna be, but I think it'll be a net positive." Like he's like, "We're moving in the right direction, right?" And that's when I started studying more into it, and then I identified like there's ROI, like money out, money in. Then I was like return on time, right? Return on like you having that sales call, that time is well spent to where we want to go. So that's a
Yes.
net positive right there versus do nothing. and complain because that there's no money right away, right? There's return
Yeah.
on objective, right? Which is
Yes.
like, what's my objective? What's my goal in life? Is this call? Is this reading? Is this, does it push me towards the return that I'm seeking in the future, right?
Yes.
So I do ROI, I do ROT, ROO, and I look at all of them that way, and I'm like, and I think I have one more, but I can't remember. Um,
Return on time,
return
return
on
on
time, return on
investment,
investment, and return on
return on
objective.
objective. Okay.
Yeah. If any of the, but what I love about yours is if any of those can be a net positive, it's game on.
That's right.
It's game
Yeah.
on. Let me ask you, man. I know we're reaching the top of the hour here. Um, and you could tell me and George can go all day. Like I could probably sit here and we could do a 5 hour podcast. And when
Probably.
you're
Yeah.
and I'm in your presence, man, when we're on those mastermind events, it's just it's even more. Let me ask you, somebody's just they're not lazy. They're just, let's say they want to call it they're smart with their time instead of lazy.
Yeah.
They come to the end of the pod, they see like the title of the podcast, they research you, and they're like, interesting. This, by the
Yeah.
way, follow him on Instagram. Put the link. He put some really good reels. They follow you, they see him, they're like, interesting. I think he's got some sauce to what he's saying here. But I'm just gonna skip to the final minute of the podcast. I'm gonna hear this one thing that he either wants to get remembered by or that wants me to remember about this specific episode. And if I absolutely love it, I'll go back and I'll listen to the other 45 minutes. What would
Yeah.
that one thing be?
The best superpower that you have is your uniqueness. You have a unique story. You have a unique set of circumstances that make up your life. Don't discount yourself. Don't discredit yourself because your life is less than perfect. Newsflash, that's life. Nobody's life is perfect. But one thing my mentor and our mutual mentor, Nicholas Bailey, always says is that your mess can be your message. And that's such a powerful thing for people to hear because your errors of the past, your current funk does not disqualify you for greater levels of life. It actually is your superpower. It's the thing that you can use to reach more people, the thing that you can use as a platform that's unique to you to speak genuinely about your experience. Because guess what? If you transcend that mess and you get to higher levels of being and of living, well, that message and that mess becomes something very, very powerful for you. And so please don't discount yourself because of your current funk or of your past mistakes. Your mess can be your message. Your uniqueness is your superpower. So step into who you are, step into what God gave you in your life. Actually step into what's around you and step into it boldly. Step into your assignment in life. And when you do that, man, you start to get people that surround you, people that come into your life that recognize you being absolutely genuine about your intentions, having a pure and genuine intention. You'll start to get people, don't ask me how, but people that will advocate for you, opportunities, people that really vibe with you, people that wants to help you, people that really resonate with you. And this is how you start to have success and be a successful human being. When you really understand what your assignment is in life and you embrace your assignment in life by being genuine to your calling and embracing your identity.
So if you're listening to this, guys, what's your identity? What's your assignment? What's your calling? What's your identity? What has been hurting that neck, keeping you up at night, and really saying like, hey, you know this is like you want more, you need more, like as an identity, like go do it. Use this podcast as a wake up call. Use this as an action plan. And if you do something, message me, message George. I'll link all his information down here. Let us know that because of this episode, you're doing something. Okay, because we want to know. And two, like George said, proximity is key. If you decide to take action and do something about it, the least we can do is support you in the journey. So George, man, thank you so much, and letting people know that they're unique and they're their own superhero, man. I don't think a lot of humans understand that. You know, we look at Superman, we look at Batman, we look at all these cool, but we have a really cool superpower. And God made us perfect. Like God, of course, we're not perfect, but God made us to do things that I don't think we're even capable of. With one of the biggest superhero powers being, you know, infinite love. We can love like no other
Yep.
creature, and it starts by loving yourselves. Thank you so much, George, for being here, brother.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. That was fun.
Awesome, guys. Again, I put his information down here. If you want to connect. Let us know. And really, thank you for joining us on another Profitable Cleaner episode.